There was buzz that it would be trending in this direction, but none would have assumed it would come after the loss to Northwestern, because none assumed that they would actually lose at home to Northwestern. So what had to be done was done. James Franklin is out, and now Penn State becomes by far the most desirable opportunity on the open market. Hello and welcome in. It's always college football. It is our Sunday after further review, deep dive, our takeaway show. We've used to put this out on Monday morning. We now are putting it out on Sunday. We just feel like we should watch a ton of tape in the morning, which, by the way, is the greatest way ever to wake up. However, today's news took us in a slightly different direction, in a direction that we didn't necessarily anticipate things happening this swiftly in Happy Valley. But guess what? There is a big Power 4 job that is now available. Penn State has parted ways with James Franklin, the biggest news in the college football world. So naturally, our takeaways will veer in that direction, especially off the top. Before we get into those, let me first start by encouraging everybody, please just go and check out our podcast. If you could subscribe to the podcast, that'd be amazing. We have a lot of listeners on the podcast, but not everybody's subscribed. It'd be amazing if you could do that. And we also have a lot of listeners. Not everybody's left a rating or a review. You don't have to do that, but if you want to help the show, that would be really great. So if you could do that, that'd be awesome. You can also check us out on the ESPN College Football YouTube page. All right, let's kick things off when what we thought was going to be a takeaway revolving around the games from yesterday's outcomes. We actually are going to start with the coaching carousel and how a big fish is officially out. Well, Penn State is officially making a move, and it felt, based on how things were going over the last 3 weeks, well, really the last 2 weeks, and if you want to get even deeper into that, the performance on Saturday was one that you just can't overlook. I actually went back and blitzed it, watched the tape just ever so slightly. This was a move that was probably bound to happen at some point this season, because one of my initial takeaways when watching this game is that things are not going to get better in Happy Valley. They're not. This team is, for whatever reason, riddled with issues. Even though it has so much returning productivity, even though it had so much positivity after last year's breakthrough season to the semifinal, this game was snake bit, and this team was snake bit from the very beginning. James Franklin is officially out after being there for a very long time, compiling a significant win-loss record. The problem is the performances against AP top 5s, the performances against AP top 10s, plus knowing the financial commitment that the university made to not just him, but his staff. And in player retention this season, the financial commitment overall was too significant to ever consider a scenario in which this team would start the season 3-3 with back-to-back 20-point losses or 20-point favorites resulting in losses. The worst 2 losses occurred by an FBS favorite this season were both had by Penn State. So it was problematic from the very beginning. But if you look at the commitment that this program has made, they now owe James Franklin $56 million in the buyout. His staff salary pool is exorbitant as well. Jim Knowles, remember, they hired him from Ohio State last offseason. He's now owed $6.2 million. Andy Kotelnicki's owed just south of $4 million. Plus the remainder of the assistant coaches. This is a significant financial hurdle for Penn State to get over. And now you have one of the most coveted jobs in America that is now available. I think it had to be done. This program was never really able to get over the top on a consistent basis. Yes, they beat up on small teams. They beat up on teams that were not in the same stratosphere as the Penn States of the world. But when they went against the Oregons, when they went against Ohio State, when they went against Michigan, they really struggled to put a whole lot together. So yes, well, James Franklin was rewarded with a 10-year deal in 2021, which to me is absolutely absurd. The guy's record, even at that point, was not what you'd want it to be to command him having a 10-year deal. But I digress. That's beside the point. This is a guy, though, that clearly things were heading in the wrong direction. And instead of allowing it to fester, Penn State decides to make an abrupt move. This is enormous. And the trickle down will be significant because Penn State is one of those jobs that people would leave a really good situation in an effort to go to Penn State. This is a place where you can win a national championship. This is a place with tremendous financial resources. They are obviously in a very fertile part of the country from a personnel standpoint. A lot of great players coming out of the great state of Pennsylvania. So this will have a tremendous trickle down throughout the college football world. There was buzz in talking to some of my Penn State folks over the last couple of days. There was buzz that it would be trending in this direction, but none would have assumed it would come after the loss to Northwestern because none assumed that they would actually lose at home to Northwestern. So what had to be done was done. James Franklin is out, and now Penn State becomes by far the most desirable opportunity on the open market for a possible head coach move. So we'll keep an eye on this. We will continue to update you with all the information that we have. We have really good inside sources at Penn State, so we will keep you posted as best we can with what's going to happen and where this coaching search will go. But my goodness, man, to rip off an $80 million Band-Aid, it's got to be a tough one to stomach there in Happy Valley. Takeaway number 2. Indiana just made a statement to the entire college football world, guys. Just an absolute statement. And we said this a couple weeks ago, and people kind of laughed at us, and they said, oh, it's Illinois. Oh, it's this. Oh, it's that. We said when we watched that game against Illinois, it was different. It was not the same Indiana team that we saw at times last year. They operated with high level efficiency, and I have respect for Illinois' program. That's a good football team. So when they went and beat Illinois the way they beat them, I said, I think Indiana's a legitimate national championship contender, and everybody laughed. Well, look who's laughing now. Number 7, Indiana marches right into the deafening confines of Autzen Stadium and hands Oregon their first defeat in Big Ten conference play. This is Indiana's first win against an AP top 5 team since 1967. It's only their second win ever, their first one by double digits. And it wasn't so much that they won the game, it was the way they won the game. And in watching it back, it was everything I thought it was going to be when I was watching it live. I sat there in the booth watching this game throughout. I'm sitting there, I'm like, man alive, Indiana is pushing people around. Like, they are moving and reestablishing the line of scrimmage. They are creating and winning those one-on-one matchups on the outside. Like, this is a very repeatable recipe. We'll start with their quarterback because I think Fernando Mendoza is incredible. One thing I love about watching him, he forces you to cover every square inch of the field. Like, we know he can throw the deep ball over the top. We've seen that. We know he can throw the out-breaking route outside the numbers from the opposite hash. The guy can throw it 40 yards in the air and put it on a dime exactly where it needs to be. We know he can throw back shoulders, so he can beat you over the top, he can beat you underneath. And we also know, too, that if you get too aggressive when pursuing their running backs in a zone read set, you crash. He can pull, and he can create with his own legs as well. His mobility makes him very, very unique. And there were several times in this game in which his first read wasn't open. There were a handful of times in which he had to get to 2, to 3, to 4, get all the way through his progression, and he's finding an outlet at some point or another. So the other thing I really appreciate too, like when they win in the back end, for example, they call the right defense. It's 3rd and 4. Boom, he'll take off. He sees it. He doesn't waste time. He just gets right through the progression and goes. It's really, really impressive. I also love Elijah Surratt. Like, this guy is one of the best receivers I've seen all season long. He's been outstanding the last 2 years. I think he's one of the best back shoulder receivers I've seen in quite some time. Anytime you're trying to play over the top, he'll be right on the back hip. Like, he always wins. It's almost like clockwork. And if he doesn't win, he draws a pass interference. And he drew 2 or 3 in the game this weekend. I love the way Black runs, their running back. I love the way Hemby runs. Their offensive line's moving people off the ball. They play with a tremendous amount of toughness. Their scheme is awesome. And then defensively, guys, they just do all the little things right. Like every single thing that they do defensively, whether it's creating havoc with movement and allowing those linebackers to fill, whether it's calling a timely pressure, even if it's just leveraging the football on a jet sweep, like they always play really well together. They're extremely well coached. And yeah, they got a couple times in the run game. Like it happens when you have guys moving and you're this aggressive defensively, you're going to get got a couple times. It happens. But if you look at kind of how things went and how they affected Dante Moore in this game, this defense played out of their mind. And you got to really tip your cap to Curt Cignetti. As much as anything else, we know for sure that he's one of the best talent evaluators in the sport, right? Like we know that. And all you got to do is just look at the personnel that he recruited at James Madison, how he brought most of those guys from James Madison to Indiana, and they won immediately. And now, after a lot of turnover from last year to this year, he goes out and identifies key pieces like a Fernando Mendoza, like a Roman Hemby, like a handful of others that have now come, like a handful of offensive linemen, a few guys defensively. They go out and they find guys that they can plug and play, and they don't skip a beat. You know he's one of the best talent evaluators, but man, I think there are so many people that will be watching this Indiana program very closely. Everyone's going to be in pursuit of Curt Cignetti, by the way. Every job that opens, the first call people might make is to Curt Cignetti. Will it materialize? I don't know. He's got a pretty good thing going at Indiana naturally. He's got a lot of support, and they got a lot of really, really good momentum going right now. But everyone's going to be calling him. But every single athletic director in the country and head coach in the country will be studying his process, the quote Cignetti effect. How can we do more as a team, maybe with less than stellar 5-star potential players? You don't necessarily need to have 22 draft picks on your team to have a really good college football team. That's what Indiana is. They are elite. They are absolutely a national championship contender, and Curt Cignetti is one of the best coaches in America. Takeaway number 3, Oregon showed some youth in that game. And that's not going to be a real comfortable thing to acknowledge, but we've been talking for a while about Oregon's youth and would it come to the forefront at some point in the season? That was, I think, something that we felt a little better about when they traveled to Penn State at the time and they went into a hostile setting, and to get a win against a team that was that well, I guess, how good they looked at that time, right? Penn State was one of the top teams in the country at that time. To go across country and to handle business, came out of it thinking, all right, hey, man, this youth is not phased by a difficult setting, not phased by a hostile environment. Man, they just played poised. They made the plays they needed to make. Yeah, they let Penn State climb back in the game, but they closed it out in overtime. Like, I actually came out of that game thinking, all right, maybe the youth isn't so much of a problem. And then I watched this game and I'm like, yep, all right, that youth still very much is something that we need to be mindful of when evaluating what Oregon might do, not just in the regular season, but maybe in the postseason as well. When the going gets tough, will that youth rise to the occasion, or will they play a little bit young, which is what I think they did in this game. They had a couple critical mistakes, and that was huge. Naturally, you lose a 18-game home win streak. That's big. Their first conference loss since they joined the Big Ten. I know they lost to Ohio State in the Rose Bowl, but not counting that. That was a postseason game. But if you just look at a couple critical mistakes, the 2nd and 3, little flat to Johnson drop, right? That would have kept the drive alive. That would have kept them going. They were in the red zone at that point. They have to settle for a field goal. They had some protection issues in which their offensive line is blocking air. They're just literally, they're blocking nobody. Meanwhile, their running back is having to block a blitzing middle linebacker. They didn't have the protection set correctly, which is another sign of youth and maybe not communicating it properly. Tip your cap to Indiana, but at the same time, veteran guys can usually solve those problems before they happen. They also, I think they allowed their quarterback to get very affected by the pass rush. Dante Moore had been flawless up to this point. He'd been so good in the first few weeks of the season. He's been such a joy to watch. He's been such a joy to cover. But there were a few times where I felt like he left the pocket a little early in this game. There were a few times that when guys were good and protection was set, he was rolling out of the pocket unnecessarily. That shows youth. He was pressing. He was trying to do too much from time to time. He also had a few times where he was outside the pocket, could have thrown it away. Instead, he takes a sack. There was one notable sack taken on a 2nd and 6 that made it 3rd and 11 when he was outside the pocket, could have just thrown it out of bounds. Pivotal mistake there. There were also a couple times when Indiana calls a blitz. They've overloaded the protection. There's not enough guys to block them. So what does that mean? You have to throw your hot route. You got to get the ball out. Dante Moore didn't do that. It resulted in a sack or a negative yardage play. He played a little young in this game, and it kind of came up. And then, of course, the 2 fatal interceptions there in the 4th quarter. You had just a bunch of mistakes, I think, made in this game by the Oregon Ducks. I look at the interceptions. The last one, 10-point game at that point, you're trying to make a play. You fit one in there. The guy was wide open right behind it. He predetermined where he was going with the ball. It happens. We've all done it. Every quarterback that's ever thrown a pick has done that. It's unfortunate. It happens. They also defensively got a couple times with DPIs. They didn't have great cover skills. They didn't do a great job of locating the ball, playing their technique. They also had a couple critical missed tackles. There were a few times in this game where it looked like Oregon was in a good position. They whiff, and next thing you know, the Indiana Hoosier player is taking off and creating yards after contact. So that was big. This is going to be a great lesson for Oregon in how to handle the environment. Don't allow your quarterback to be affected by the pass rush. Make sure your protection is sound. Make sure we're better fundamentally on the defensive side. This is still a remarkably talented football team that I have high hopes for, but they need to play a more mature brand of football the next time they get on the stage like that, because their own mistakes led to this game turning into Indiana's favor. But credit the Hoosiers for making them make those mistakes. Takeaway number 4. Texas just showed the grit that we've been waiting for. That was what we were waiting for from the Texas Longhorns, right? We have for a while now, we always knew that if it became a track meet, if it was pretty, Texas can win games like that. They've always been able to win games like that, man. Like, they are fun. They're fun to watch. They're athletic. They can do a lot of different things. But if it becomes a churn and burn slugfest where you're just throwing body blows to the opposition, is Texas willing to have that fight? Are they willing to win that fight? Are they willing to take the aggression to the opponent by delivering that physicality? And to be honest with you, there have been times in the last couple of years where I'm like, all right, well, Texas is taking a stride in that direction. And then they play against, say, Georgia, and they get just gashed because of the physicality that Georgia played with. This, I think, was a massive step in the right direction for them. And I would imagine for Longhorn fans, this was kind of a cathartic win, was it not? Because I feel like this program over the last couple of weeks, for example, the Florida game, Florida was the more physical football team. They won that game because of their physicality. Texas didn't want any part of it. Well, in this game, Texas was the aggressor. And this was a win that was built on a foundation of complementary football and just a physical emphasis on both lines of scrimmage. I thought it was a very, very solid performance. I think the star of the game, if we're going to go in one direction, it wasn't so much an individual player. It was really the collective effort defensively. I thought they did a really good job just suffocating this Oklahoma offense, making John Mateer very uncomfortable throughout the game. He was constantly being hit. He was constantly under duress. They were constantly affecting his vision with how they were condensing the pocket and denting the pocket up front defensively. They held Oklahoma to just over 250 yards of offense. That is really, really impressive. And of course, they forced 3 significant interceptions, some that literally took points off the board. We'll talk about the offense. I loved this formula from Steve Sarkisian. This was not easy early on. You look at the first quarter of this football game, it would have been pretty easy for Steve Sarkisian to abandon the run. It would have been really easy for him to say, all right, guys, we're not going to be able to run it today. Like, the way Oklahoma's playing up front, the way we're struggling right now running the football, we're going to have to abandon the run, boys. Arch, get ready. You're going to have to throw it 50 times. He stayed patient. And I think there's a lot to be said about his patience that was on display in this game, because he stuck with the run. He stayed committed to the run. And then all of a sudden, you start to see Wisner get going a little bit. I thought Wisner played a whale of a game. Really ran the ball extremely well. He finishes with just under 100 yards. But there were a handful of plays where it looked like there was not going to be anything there. There were minimal gain at most. This is not just, by the way, in the run game. This is also on short passes where he's making the guy miss, and all of a sudden it's a 20-yard gain. when it might have been a gain of 2 or 3. There were at least 3 or 4 moments in which I thought it was a 1, maybe 2-yard run, and then boom, he pops out, he gains 9. Boom, he pops out, he gains 13. Boom, he pops out and he gains 22. There was a really, really strong commitment to the run game here, and I appreciate very much that they took some of that pressure off the pass rush. They took some of that pressure off Arch Manning, and this newfound commitment, I think, is a recipe that can be replicated from this point forward for this Longhorn offense. As far as Arch, I think this was a very efficient day. And the numbers are not going to wow you. You're going to sit there and say, all right, 21 of 27 for 166 and a touchdown. Those are not numbers that are going to line the marquee at the Heisman Trophy ceremony. But if you actually watch the game and look at some of the things he did throughout the game, you're going to say, hang on, that was really, really well done. He had 2 or 3 throwaways in this game. Incompletions, right? On the box score. Just incompletions on the box score. No one's even thinking about him right now. But if he doesn't somehow evade the rush, escape, and just throw it away, they're way behind the sticks, and now they're off schedule offensively. He did a great job in the pocket, a really good job, and he was outstanding, I think, on critical down and distance. When it came to third downs, he was off the charts in this game, finding opportunities not just on the ground, through the air, but also on the ground. I mean, he put the game on ice with a third down pull read on the zone read, moves around to the outside, and he did a great job of sliding and essentially icing the game there at the very end. There was one play in particular that I thought was just phenomenal. There was a lot of pressure. He was basically in his own end zone. A lot of pressure. He somehow evades, rolls to his right, and throws a strike on the sideline to Parker Livingston. It was big time, and it completely flipped the field. So highly impressed with how Arch Manning played in this game. He was really solid, and when his pocket was clean, and it wasn't clean a ton, but when it was clean, he was 16 of 17 for 119 yards and a touchdown. So when he had really good protection, which, like I said, was not as often as you'd like for it to be, he had 10 attempts where he was under duress. Those 17 plays, though, where he had a clean pocket, 16 to 17 for 120 and a touchdown. Very, very well done. And I'd love, like I said, how he bought some time in the pocket and made that offensive line better and lived to play second down if the play wasn't there by just throwing it away. Defensively, I loved how they got after John Mateer. I thought the first interception was entirely due to the pass rush that forced him to kind of drift, almost make kind of like a jumping throw that was off target. It secured. It was a get-right recipe for their defense that had come under fire these last couple weeks. When are these pass rushers going to show up? When is this defensive line going to take over the game? When is the secondary going to play up to their potential? Well, this was finally it. It was extremely well done. It was Texas's largest win against an AP top 10 team while unranked since 1957. So I think this is not necessarily an indicator of Texas now going on a run, winning out, winning the SEC and potentially the national championship. There are still flaws here, and there are still things to iron out, but this was a huge step in the right direction. This was an impressive victory and one that they can hang their hat on in the future, because that's a good Oklahoma team that they beat, and that's a really good Oklahoma defense that they created several opportunities against. Takeaway number 5. The Oklahoma offense is still very much a work in progress. Their offensive line got pushed around throughout this game. They're still extremely one-dimensional. Unless it's John Mateer running the football, they have a bit of a struggle from time to time running the ball in a traditional sense. Now, there were a few runs that were created in this game, but not nearly enough to take some of the pressure off the pass rush. They got off schedule a handful of times, and that certainly didn't help them. And as far as Mateer, he looked rusty. I mean, the guy is a super talented, very gifted player. And man, I tip my cap to him for coming back and trying to play in this game. As a kid from the Dallas-Fort Worth area, my dream was to play in the Red River rivalry. That was my dream. That was the number one game in my world as a young 13-year-old kid living in Dallas, Texas. Well, John Mateer is also from the Dallas-Fort Worth area. You know, it meant the world to him to go and play for Oklahoma against Texas, a team that passed on him in recruiting. And now he's sitting there like, I got a chance to go win this for my team and to kind of exercise a demon against them for not recruiting me. I don't blame him at all for trying to go, but to do it on 17 days, that kid is tough as nails. He has the utmost respect for me, but the rust was very apparent. He threw 3 picks, but there were a lot of throws in this game that he normally would make or normally would put in a perfect spot to allow run after catch, and he just couldn't quite do it in this game. Now, I'm expecting he's probably only going to get better from here, but if you look at the first interception, for example, his feet were kind of a mess. He didn't really set his feet, plant his feet, and while he was feeling pressure, he had a guy open. That's a throw he makes 99 times out of 100. In this particular case, he misses it. He's just not at 100%. The second interception, he's trying to do too much, just pressing, trying to make a play at the end of half. But in reality, you're already in field goal range. It's a game in which the points are going to be at a premium. You cannot make that throw. You can't try it. It's just a bad decision. There were also a couple other throws that he made in the game that could have very easily been intercepted by Texas defenders, but they were dropped. He also had one where he threw it behind the wide receiver late to the right-hand side. It's actually a lateral, so the ball's backwards. Now all of a sudden, it's a 21-yard loss as opposed to a potential gain of 4 if he just keeps it. So there was some rust in this game. He also took a couple of sacks on consecutive plays when they were in the fringe of field goal range, all these other things. So there was rust there very obviously from John Mateer. I'm not worried about him. He's going to be just fine. This offensive system's going to be just fine, but they got to figure out a way to consistently try to run the football. I thought the defense did a lot of nice things in this game. They gave up 13, 16 points, whatnot, and that was with a pretty significant turnover margin against them. So I thought the defense was fine in this game. They did a lot of nice things, but if you really look at where things are, it came down to Oklahoma's offense just not doing what they need to do to give their team a real chance to be successful. They also had a massive call there early in the fourth quarter. John Mateer has a run play out the left-hand side. It's probably the biggest hole they have in the run game all game long. They get a critical holding penalty. So instead of 1st and 10 inside the 15-yard line going in, you now are sitting there at 2nd and 20, and it wipes things out because he throws his 3rd interception on the very next play. So this, I think, was probably a very frustrating game for the Oklahoma Sooner team, probably a frustrating game for their staff and for their quarterback, but I'm still a believer in his ability, and I fully expect him to be better next week with another week of practice coming back from the injury where he's a little more accurate, a little more decisive, and a little bit more like himself. Takeaway number 6, USC is exactly who we thought they were. Now, since their move from the Pac-12 to the Big Ten, there's been a long conversation about the identity of a Lincoln Riley football team. Would their, quote, finesse, which I don't even like saying that word because finesse is a state of mind. Just because they score a lot of points doesn't mean they can't be physical. That to me is ridiculous. But in reality, if you look back at his time at Oklahoma and his time early at USC, the defense was a challenge. And if you aren't good on defense, you're probably going to be labeled as such. Is it fair? Probably not, but it's the reality. So you got to do something about it. Well, this win, I think, shatters that narrative, which is really, really big. This was a culture-defining victory that I think will fundamentally alter how we perceive USC in the years to come. King Miller is not a guy that was on our bingo card here throughout the first 5 games of the season. I don't think it was on yours. Maybe it was, unless you're King Miller's family. I'm not sure any of us could have anticipated him being the star of the show on a spotlight like this. But to go out there because of some injuries to the guys in front of him for a freshman walk-on to be on the field against Michigan and for him to go for nearly 160 on the ground and to become the first USC walk-on to find the end zone since 1994. He's got clearly some explosive capabilities. He had a 50-yard run, a 49-yard run, 47-yard run. I mean, he is a guy that really demoralized this Michigan defense throughout. So that he's got some real juice. And I think this was a very hard-nosed victory for USC. Like, we know they can throw it. We know they got a great quarterback. We know they have a super, super talented duo at wide receiver. We know they have weapons. That's never not been the case. But to be able to run the ball as efficiently as they ran the ball against a Michigan team that's one of the best in the country against the run, that says an awful lot. This group went for 225 on the ground, 224 on the ground against a Michigan team that was top 7 in the country against the run. That says an awful lot about where this team is going and where this group could end up as the season goes along. And then defensively, they continue to be very opportunistic. That's what this defense does. They create turnovers, they create eye violations, they make plays on the ball, and they're very, very disruptive. The fact that they held the Wolverines to just 2 third-down conversions in the game says a lot about their ability to ramp it up to affect the opposing quarterback, cover down when necessary. This was a highly, highly entertaining performance from USC, and I think it will now provide a little momentum into what should be a big matchup next week against the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. I had USC in the playoff in the preseason. They almost went to Illinois and got a win. They had the lead, if not for giving up that 2-minute drive that ended up leaving them on the losing end. But this is a team that I think will be in the mix at the end of the year. With how they run it, with the quarterback play they're currently getting, with the weaponry they have on the outside, and with the improved nature of how they're approaching their defensive front and marrying it up with their back end and creating opportunities by creating short fields and creating turnovers, I think this USC team is very real. And I think they will find their way in the college football playoff if they can build on this most recent performance against the Wolverines. Takeaway number 7. Georgia remains one of the toughest outs in our sport. It's absolutely unbelievable. Just a couple numbers to help you understand what happens when you jump on the dogs early. All right. Kirby Smart is 12-14. 12-14. You're going to say that's under 500. Well, think about this. When they are trailing by 10 or more points at any point in the game, they win about 46% of their games in which they are trailing by 10 or more. That is the second highest winning percentage in the last 10 years. The only other team that is better than the Georgia Bulldogs when they get in an early hole are the Ohio State Buckeyes. They are 19-15 when trailing at halftime under Kirby Smart. That is the most wins in the FBS when trailing at halftime in the last 10 years. And this was an unbelievable flip from one play on. The way this game turned, I'm not sure I've ever seen anything like it. I really haven't. One single play, one singular moment, and all of a sudden one team is dominating. At one point, when the fumble happened with Jackson Arnold, when I got to be honest with you, I thought he broke the plane. I thought the football broke the plane. What was lost in all of that is what an incredibly heads-up play by C.J. Allen to try to punch the ball out. Unbelievable play there at the second level defensively. And these linebackers for Georgia, man, and they're in the second half, they took over the game. But prior to that fumble, Auburn had around 240 yards of offense. Georgia at that time had just 20. It was 12-1 yardage output at the time of that fumble. Everything went Auburn's way there in the first half, first 29 minutes. And then boom, in the last two, Georgia flips it on its head. They go into the half down just a score after getting completely dominated. And they find a way to make the adjustments. And they are a completely different unit coming out of halftime, man. Unreal. That 10-point swing, though, forced the fumble, which would have been 7 in favor of the Auburn Tigers, into 3 for your own team. It was a psychological dynamic that is not often seen in a college football game like that. It was absolutely absurd. And then if you look at the final 2 quarters, they held Auburn to just 40 yards of total offense there in the second half. That's the fewest yards, by the way, by an Auburn offense in a half of a football game since 2017 when they played against Clemson. That Clemson team, of course, was a perennial playoff contender, one of the best teams in America. So this is absolutely absurd. But another amazing thing about this game was how much better the offensive line played in the second half of this football game. Gunnar Stockton, I thought, really settled in. He's tough as nails. He's resilient. He was pressured there in the first half on nearly half of his dropbacks. He got hit time and time and time again. Well, in the second half, this offensive line, Gunnar Stockton dropped back 26 times in the second half. He was pressured on just 5 of those 26 dropbacks. That is a significant improvement from being near 50% pressure rate in the first half to under 20% in the second half. Says a lot about that group's ability to kind of weather the storm and then anchor down in the second half of this football game. Stockton, when he wasn't pressured, he was 14 of 18 for 131. So he played really well when the pocket was clean and when he was able to get the ball out of his hands quickly and make it some plays on the move. I loved what Auburn did early in this game. The pressure, the blitz packages, the ability to stop the run with just their front four, the aggressiveness. Georgia just took it on the chin. They just weathered the storm, made the adjustments, and just kept on playing the next play. That is a sign of a tremendously mentally tough football team. And I think another thing about this too, when you look at Georgia's roster, they are young. This is a young group for the most part. They have a lot of guys that are playing as sophomores and as redshirt freshmen and as true freshmen in some cases. It's a young group. So for them now, not once, but twice this season to go in a ridiculously hostile setting. That setting last night in Jordan-Hare was amazing. Like, we were on the call. It was unbelievable in that building. It was so good. For them to weather that storm, just like they did at Tennessee, and then to just move it all to the side and say, guys, let's focus on the task at hand. No problem whatsoever. Things couldn't have gone worse in the first half, but guess what? There's 2 more quarters to play. Let's anchor down and get this thing done. Very, very impressive win for the Georgia Bulldogs to go force the mistakes and make the adjustments to find a way to victory for their 9th straight win against the Auburn Tigers in the Deep South's oldest rivalry. Let's go next to takeaway number 8. I think Alabama just passed their biggest maturity test to date. Now, you're going to a venue at Faurot Field where Missouri has won 15 straight home games. All right, this is a very difficult place to go play. This is the second, going into this game, it was the second longest active home win streak. They were tied with Alabama there. Oregon, ironically, had the longest home win streak going into Saturday. But Alabama, early in this game, it was not great. It was looking like, oh man, this is going to be a tough start. Alabama has just played in the last 2 weeks. They played on the road in a ridiculously hostile setting against the Georgia Bulldogs in a physical football game from start to finish for 60 minutes. Then they had to come back, revenge on the mind for the Vanderbilt Commodores. They beat them the year before. Vanderbilt's a really good football team. So Bama emotionally had to ramp it up again. They ramped it up emotionally for Georgia. They ramp it up emotionally again for Vanderbilt. Now you're going on the road, 11 o'clock kick against a really good Missouri football team, and you got to ramp up the emotions yet again. And guess what? You're in a 7-0 hole before you blink. Well, Alabama goes right down the field and answers on their first drive, converting a handful of third downs on that first drive that were very impressive. And honestly, while the numbers won't wow you, Ty Simpson was lights out in this game, especially on critical down and distance. 3 for 3 on 4th down, including the eventual game-winning pass to Daniel Hill to the left corner of the end zone. He also, earlier in that drive, connected to Latsier Brooks on a perfectly placed 18-yard gain on 4th and 8 from about the plus 35-yard line. It was a perfectly thrown football, exactly where you would have wanted it. It was well covered, it was well defended, but the throw was just too good. Ty Simpson was really, really impressive in gotta-have-it situations in this game. He also, from where he was in week 1, where Florida State's pressure had an effect, not just on him, but on the offense's identity as a whole, he has progressed over the last few weeks under duress as well as anybody in the country. In this game, he was under duress 12 separate dropbacks. In those 12 dropbacks, he was 7 for 12 and a touchdown. That's really, really good when you take into account the national average under duress is around like 38% completion. Well, he completed 7 to 12 and had a touchdown. This is the second straight week in which he's thrown a touchdown pass under duress, and in the first 4 games, he didn't have any like that. So he just continues to get better. He continues to play at a high level. And while I was a little concerned with the fumble there early in the second half, looked like he might have hurt something in his lower body, it didn't have an effect on him. When the game was on the line and they needed their quarterback to be at his best, his surgical self, he was able to deliver in a really big moment. And then defensively, it was going to be a big challenge to stop the run. That was number one point bulletin that we had when talking about this game in the preview. This was the number one point bulletin I would imagine the defensive staff had for Alabama all throughout the week. Like, we got to stop Ahmad Hardy. Guarantee that was the message that was sent to these players. Well, they just stopped the SEC's leading rusher for 52 yards. It's the first game in which Ahmad Hardy was kept under the 100-yard mark in his time at Missouri. He's been unbelievable these first few weeks. In Alabama, their defense has at times been a little susceptible to the run game, especially with all the ways that Missouri can try to attack you with misdirection and things like that. I thought they also did a great job of tackling. Ahmad Hardy came into this game as one of the best players in the country in yards after contact. Well, Alabama held him 2 yards under his average in that area. They swarmed to the football, they tackled really well, and they also made some great plays down the stretch by getting hands on the football. And they could have had more interceptions. If they could just secure a few more of those picks, this game would have been over a little sooner than it was. But a very impressive performance and a display of maturity from Alabama to go at 11 o'clock and to play against a really high quality football team that was coming off a bye, that had this game circled, and for you to go out and to perform like that and to have it really locked up with a 10-point lead in there in the fourth quarter before you kind of take your foot off the gas says an awful lot about what this team's capable of, even in the most hostile and difficult circumstances they might face this season. Takeaway number 9. Another week and another dominant performance from Ohio State, Texas A&M, and Texas Tech. It is unbelievable, guys. Man, I'm watching these teams every week. These are 3 of my favorites, I might add. Like, just watching Ohio State, watching Texas Tech, watching Texas A&M, I have had such a joy watching these games that these teams have played these last couple of weeks. Guys, Ohio State has won their 14th straight game as the AP number 1 ranked team. That's the longest streak in program history, and it's the 3rd longest streak by any team in the FBS over the last 20 years. And here's what's remarkable. This is a team that lost 8 starters to the NFL draft on the defensive side of the football. 8 starters to the NFL draft on defense alone, and they're better. How is that possible? It's hard for me to even wrap my head around, if I'm going to be honest. When you look at what the Buckeyes did offensively, it was a good, solid performance. But when you're getting the ball at the 35, the 38, and the 26, you're starting on those yard lines. It says an awful lot. The first couple quarters, man, I mean, they're capitalizing on turnovers. They're forcing fumbles. They have the turnover on downs to basically take those 3 possessions, turn them into 17 points in the blink of an eye, man. It was off the charts. And Matt Patricia there on the 3rd takeaway to dial up that corner pressure, boom, got him, right? It's amazing how they've been able to react. And this was Jermaine Matthews, right? So he's playing on the outside. He slides inside. He's got a tough draw and having to cover Hank Beatty all game long. Well, boom, he blitzes, strips Altmaier. And there they are again. Caden Curry snags it. And it sets the stage for another short field scoring drive. So they've allowed 41 points this season defensively. That's under 7 points per game. That's their fewest allowed since 1975 in the first 6 games of the season. So whatever Ohio State's doing, just keep rinse and repeat. Just keep it going, baby, because it is absolute clinic tape with what we've seen so far. A&M, they moved to 6-0. This is a good 34-17 victory against the Florida Gators. Their first 6-0 start since 2016. The defense was suffocating, especially on 3rd down. They allowed just 1 for 10 on 3rd down. They were really, really good. I felt like all throughout the game. They were disciplined. They did, obviously, Florida was able to move the ball at least early, and then they kind of buckled down the hatches, and then things started to kind of flow in their favor. So a really good win here from Texas A&M. I really like what I've seen on both sides of the ball. I thought Marcel Reed had a really nice game. He played solid as well. This is a really solid Aggie football team. And then the Red Raiders, just dominating a really good and explosive Kansas team, 42-17. No problem whatsoever. Their first 6-0 start since 2013, which is pretty remarkable. They are definitely the best team in the Big 12 right now. I'm not sure the gap is really that close. It is Texas Tech's world, and everyone else in the Big 12 is just currently living in it. But this was big because they established the run game. I mean, we have known for a while that Texas Tech, they can light you up through the air. That's been understood. I always liked their running backs, though, and I was always curious, like, all right, if they needed it, can they get it? Well, they answered that question in remarkable fashion. Cameron Dickey goes for 263 on the ground, a remarkable feat. Cameron Dickey, by the way, had never gone over 100 in his career. He goes for 263 in this game. They rushed for 372 total yards in this matchup. And not to be outdone, the defense was every bit as good as we always anticipate them being. They held the Jayhawks, who have a lot of speed at quarterback. They have a lot of speed at running back, and they have a decent offensive line. They allowed just under 2 yards per carry. This was a really strong performance from Texas Tech. And I'm not really sure I expected it to be that dominant. I thought they'd win the game. Certainly did not think they would lay it on the Jayhawks like that. So those three teams, man, dominant, impressive, clinic work from those teams that I think are all legitimate national championship contenders. Takeaway number 10, and we don't often do this because we want to live in the moment. We want to focus on what's right in front of us. We want to review what just transpired here this past weekend. But takeaway number 10 is you better buckle up for week 8, guys. We need all hands on deck this weekend. If you love college football, this is the weekend for you. Just a little tail of the tape of some of the matchups that we have. And we will break these games down. We will do a full preview on our show a little later this week. But we start here on Friday night with Louisville at Miami. Louisville's a really well-coached football team coming off a bye. Miami's one of the best teams in America, also coming off a bye. That should be a really entertaining game. Tremendous coaching matchup, tactical matchup with Jeff Brom calling the plays against a resurgent and vastly improved Miami defense. Then it gets better on Saturday. How about this for the noon window by itself? Okay, you have a top 20 matchup between LSU and Vanderbilt. Both teams with one loss. Vanderbilt, very real, coming off a bye. LSU trying to get their offense going a little bit. You have undefeated Georgia Tech traveling on the road to a 4-2 Duke football team that has been very, very solid at times this year, and I think very dangerous football team for Georgia Tech to deal with. So that will be tough for Georgia Tech to keep that record unblemished when they go on the road to Durham. You have a 5-1 Washington team who has quietly navigated through a pretty impressive 6-game stretch. They did lose to Ohio State on their home field, but to be 5-1, a remarkable comeback a couple weeks ago against Maryland. Well, they're now going on the road to the Big House to play against what might be a desperate 4-2 Michigan football team. That's an enormous game there at noon. You also have a 5-1 Oklahoma team trying to bounce back, going on the road into what should be a ridiculously hostile setting there in Columbia, South Carolina, who, while they have their challenges offensively, defensively, they are really, really stout and have an excellent front four that can cause a lot of problems for an offensive line in Oklahoma that might have some challenges blocking Dylan Stewart and company. At 3:30, you have a top 10 matchup between Ole Miss and Georgia. You know Georgia is kind of aiming for the revenge from last year's defeat at the hands of the Rebels. You also have a top 5 Texas A&M team that's going on the road to rival Arkansas. And while Arkansas is sitting there, you're looking at their record, they're 2-4. This is a team that can score. This is a team that can make a lot of issues for your defense if you are not sound on that side of the ball. And you know Arkansas, even though the record's not been great and the start through 6 games has not been great, they've already fired their coach. You know Arkansas fans are going to be all hands on deck for this one. It's the first time it hasn't been played at AT&T Stadium there in Dallas in a while. It's moving to a home venue. It's going to be in Fayetteville. So they haven't had the Aggies in Fayetteville in quite some time. This is going to be a very tough game for the Texas A&M Aggies, and then just sets the stage for what's an outrageously good window there in the prime window this weekend. We're 5-1 USC, fresh off a really impressive win against Michigan's got to ramp it up again. They go on the road to Notre Dame, who's sitting at 4-2, and Notre Dame might be treating this game as if their college football playoff life is on the line. They lose this game, they've now lost to Texas A&M, they've lost to Miami, and they potentially lose to USC. This could be a college football playoff elimination game for the Fighting Irish. So they'll be ready to roll in what is a desperate spot for them to keep their playoff hopes alive. You have top 20 Missouri traveling to Auburn, trying to get back on track. Mizzou trying to stay in the mix for the college football playoff conversation. And Auburn, they can't catch a break. They've lost 3 in a row, but they were in complete control of that game against Georgia there in the first half before things got away from them there in the second half. So that's still very hostile setting, very difficult place to go play. And now Mizzou's got to bounce back in a big way and go play in that venue to keep their playoff hopes alive. That will be very difficult. You got the holy war between Utah and BYU, 2 teams that are very much in the mix, trying to figure out who's second right now in the Big 12. We know Texas Tech's first. Well, BYU currently unblemished record, currently sitting at 3-0 after a remarkable double overtime win on the road at Arizona, where they erased a 10-point fourth quarter deficit. They're still undefeated. They welcome their biggest rival into their house to try to figure out, all right, this might be the next best team. This might be the team that is in spot to best contend against Texas Tech if they get to the finish line with where they're at right now. And then to make things even better there in the nightcap, you have the third Saturday in October where Tennessee, a top 10, top 11, top 12 Tennessee, has to go on the road to Alabama to play under the lights there in Bryant-Denny. So buckle up, guys, because week 8 is going to be off the charts good. All right, we always do this here at the end of our Sunday evening show. We give you our bold predictions from the week before, and we want to give a shout out to a few of these, man, because some of these people nailed it. We will start with No Handle 33. The Red River rivalry is made for upsets. Give me the Horns by 3. Texas fight. OU, I won't say it. Texas did win the game. They did not win by 3. They won in more convincing fashion, 23-6. We'll go to Jack Espy. Auburn beats Georgia. Very close. It was looking like this was going to materialize, especially they're about to be up 17-0 on the fringe of the goal line. Fumble flips that game on its head. Georgia storms back. They win the game 20-10. We'll go next to at Road to the Rose Bowl podcast. Auburn beats Georgia in a classic that we'd love to see. Again, Georgia won. And Auburn fans were very confident going into this game, but this, I don't know, depending on your definition of a classic, I don't know if I'd go that far. It was a little crazy for sure. Memorable for sure, but classic, probably not. We'll go next to at Gronk number 1. The Gators will demolish the Aggies in College Station. Not the case. Very much the other way around. Texas A&M handles business against the Gators 34-17. At Las Laura J 905, Pitt goes into Tallahassee and upsets the Seminoles. Well done. Pitt wins the game 34-31. Terrific call. This Pitt quarterback, there's something there. There's something there. And then Florida State, man, 3 losses in a row after what was an incredible start to the season. They got to get things back on track quickly because things could spiral out of control just like it did last year. We'll go next to at OG Snowbone 9364. Ducks by 30. Indiana went to Eugene and knocked off Oregon 30-20. Very impressive win by the Hoosiers. So not so close, my friend OG Snowbone. And then John Bradley at Bradley CFB. Iowa State makes it 2 consecutive losses and drops out of the Greg McElroy top 25 as Colorado ekes out a narrow win in Boulder following the fast running of Ralphie. Colorado won this game 24-17. Their second victory against a ranked opponent in Deion Sanders' tenure there as the head coach of the Buffaloes. So great choice there, John. Awesome prediction. One other thing that we want to leave you with, desperation is a very powerful tool. Just wanted to kind of set the table on this, by the way, for teams that might be in, quote, desperation mode. Michigan next week, Notre Dame next week. Desperation is very powerful. Texas felt desperate this past weekend, and they had to have a win. They got one against Oklahoma. The week before, Florida felt desperate against Texas. They get the win against the Texas Longhorns. Bama felt desperate against Georgia. They don't get that win. Then the Tide are now 3-2 and going into the back half of the season with a lot of very difficult games up in front of them. They were desperate. They get the win. A handful of other teams this year have been desperate, and they've gotten wins when they have been in an underdog setting. Just something to set the table with. Might be worth watching when we preview these games and make some predictions a little later in the week. So for all of us here at Always College Football, we remind all of you to go ahead and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get the podcast. Leave us a rating, leave us a review. We'd really appreciate that. And then also check us out on the ESPN College Football YouTube page. So for all of us here at ACF, for Mark, Jake, Jack, the other Jack intern, Sam, I'm Greg. We hope you have an amazing day. And remember, it's always college football. Hey guys, it's Greg McElroy. Thanks for watching Always College Football. Make sure you like, rate, and subscribe to ESPN's YouTube channel and wherever you listen to your podcasts.